Grab your pre-workout and turn up that volume. It is time for a new episode of the Powerlifter's Den with your host, Cam Smith. What's up, Powerlifter's Den family? Want to rep the podcast and look good while doing it? Check out my official merch store at plden.company.site. We've got tees, hoodies, beanies, hats, and more, and gear that'll keep you motivated in and out of the gym. Every purchase helps support me and the podcast and keeps the den growing strong. So whether you're hitting a heavy squat session or just lounging in style, we've got you covered. Head to plden.company.site and grab your merch today. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Powerlifter's Den. I'm your host, Cam Smith, and today, this week's guest is a little bit different than our usual guest. Obviously, he's still a powerlifter, but he has a much different story than many of us. So, Jared, why don't you introduce yourself?
What's up, Cam? Thanks for having me on, man. I'm Jared Maynard. I'm a physical therapist. I'm a powerlifter, strength coach, business owner. I'm a girl dad, massive Star Wars nerd, public speaker too. And glad to be here chatting with you. We got connected a little after Dave Tate and I chatted, and honored to have your time.
Yeah, so I guess before we get into anything, I just want to ask you, what's your favorite Star Wars movie?
It's got to be Empire Strikes Back.
Okay.
And I can say a lot of good things, especially in retrospect about the prequels. We didn't know what we had when we had it, and I think it took the sequels to put it into perspective.
Yeah, as a 2000s baby, the Revenge of the Sith is peak cinema in my opinion. So, but that's Empire Strikes Back is an acceptable answer for sure.
Acceptable. Okay, good. I didn't crash and burn in the first minute.
Yep. But anyways, before we kind of get into your recovery journey, let's talk about your early stages of just being in the fitness industry. What kind of got you into it, and how did you find your way from the platform?
Yeah, man. So I grew up as a fat kid, and I had next to no confidence because I kept getting bullied in school, at recess, getting picked last in gym class, and at recess when the kids were playing around. And because I couldn't have used these words at the time, but because I was tired of that rejection, where it wasn't a question of, do people want me? It was, do they want me less than that other kid? Am I going to be picked last or second last? Like that was the race I was in. So I hid as much as I could. And, this would have been third grade or so for me. Beautiful summer days. Other kids are outside playing ball hockey or whatever kids do. I'm in my parents' basement and just watching TV because the TV is not going to judge me. TV is not going to say you're fat, no one likes you. My parents saw that and they wanted to try to stop or intervene on that cycle because they definitely wanted me to be active for one, but then also, not have me feel like I didn't belong. So they tried to fit me into different sports. We tried basketball, we tried t-ball, we even tried tennis and some other things. Nothing really stuck. I did basketball for a season, but I wasn't good. I didn't like it. And it wasn't until we found Kung Fu that it was the first thing that I took to. And it could have been because I grew up watching Power Rangers and I wanted to be the original Red Ranger, or because I got to punch people and like that was fine. No one would get mad at me. But that was the first setting where I started to feel what it felt like to be confident. And I wasn't judged for looking different or not knowing the things, not being good yet. Everybody was just there trying to get better. And the people who were really good were helping the people who weren't great yet. And that was amazing. I started to learn discipline, integrity, teamwork. And it was a place where I started to become part of a community, and not only just part of it, but I was invited to be part of this special class. They called it the Black Sash Club, where basically kids who worked hard, they showed promise, they were invited to this extra class where you got to learn advanced forms, you got to work with weapons, you got to go out in the community and do demonstrations. So I really went from this experience of being the reject outcast to now being part of a group and also the kind of person that the group used to make other people want to join their group, which was amazing.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that I've kind of noticed is some of those martial arts, whether it's kung fu, taekwondo, karate, anything like that, I feels like it's something that's almost like a dying sport in a way that it's like people only train those now to become a fighter. But if you've ever done, like I did taekwondo for a few years, and they're very focused on bettering yourself as a person, and it's like there's a lot of lessons from it that people would greatly benefit from in society.
Fully agree. And I don't know, like you said, don't know how many people seek that out specifically for the life lessons, the
Yeah.
Mr. Miyagi moments. But it's the stuff that, like, yeah, you probably go in to be a fighter, to be able to take care of yourself, which was also part of it for me. Like, oh, I'm a fat kid who now I can like take people down and stuff. Like that's pretty fucking awesome. And then you learn those things along the way, which for me was massive. So because I had that first positive experience, which I stuck with for about 3 years or so, then that made me think it was possible the next time that there was a sport that I wanted to be involved in. Oh, I can go do that. There's nothing that says I can't. And that for me was football. So that happened because we had a family movie night tradition and we watched Remember the Titans
Classic.
and classic. I can quote that line for line in many scenes. My dad was the only one who had played football in our family. So every game sequence, we had to stop it every few seconds and ask, Dad, like, is that what happened? Are we happy? Are we sad? What's the deal? And I loved it. And I was just like, I need to do that. So God bless my dad. He signed me up for a summer camp, went through that, went up for the school team the next year. And I played for the following 3 seasons. I mostly played tight end and slot back. I couldn't catch a pass to save my life, but I blocked with everything I had and I practiced hard and I played hard and I started every game for those 3 years. Um, so like a different vibe, right? Going from nothing social outcast to kind of a group setting, but still individual with martial arts,
Yeah, yeah.
and then very much a team setting.
Yep.
So the that all factors into powerlifting because at the end of my junior year, it was the end of the school year. The coaches pretty well knew who was going to come up for the team the following year, so they took us out for fitness testing. It wasn't super formal. It was like, how many pull-ups can you do? How many dips? How fast is your 100-meter sprint? Stuff like that. They only had one rule, which is that when you came back for summer camp, if you were better, you got to play. They didn't care about how much. You could be better by 1 rep or whatever.
Hmm.
That just showed that you were training because they didn't give us an S&C program or anything like that.
Yeah.
So I got a whopping like 1 pull up. I got like I don't know how many dips, but definitely not the most athletic guy on the team by a far sight. But because I had to train, my parents had equipment in their basement, and my dad had like an old bodybuilding book by Bill Phillips and stuff. So he showed me a few things, and that was me that summer, just lifting bodybuilding style. And it was there that I got another taste of that confidence in a different flavor, where now I could see I'm adding more weight, I could do more reps. I start to see my body change a little bit, and like that makes me feel more confident. Take the kid who's learned how to fight and now put some muscle on him, he feels like a freaking human weapon, you
Yeah.
know? So that led to the next season, finished out my senior year, and then I needed something to do for, the 2 hours a day that I would have been on the field. I just kept lifting. So high school finished, went into university, kept lifting more for like aesthetics, not quite bodybuilding focused yet, but like want to look good for the girls. So that was through my undergrad years. And then this takes me to 2012, which you might remember. This is like big YouTube fitness, Matt Ogus, Chris Jones, Omar Isuf, like, and also natural bodybuilding having a like a heyday or a renaissance.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So seeing all that, I'm like, I want to do that. Um, so I took a year between my undergrad and my physical therapy degree, just because I didn't get into a school.
Hmm.
So I kept training, hired a bodybuilding coach, never competed, but trained for bodybuilding for a couple of years. I got pretty damn lean. It was sub 10% for a period of time for sure. And then this takes me into physical therapy school, where the focus on trying to get super lean, the self-critiquing of my physique all the time, just because of the bodybuilding focus, coupled with undiagnosed anxiety and unmanaged anxiety, and then a total life shift of getting into PT school. It's do or die, it's cramming, it's a professional program, all the things led to this really big cycle where I now started to binge eat, which I hadn't done prior to at any point in my life. And uh, I don't know if Dave and I actually talked about this, but the coach that I had, who was very popular at the time, um, he like we rolled through a few binge cycles, and it would be the things got overwhelming. I'd eat everything because I was, 1, actually hungry,
Yeah.
and then 2, it was comfort and food. And then I'd email him and all apologetic and, beating myself up, and then he'd try to guide me through that. "All right, take a refeed. Here's what we're gonna do." That happened a couple of times, 2, maybe 3. The next binge cycle, it was the same story, and I still have the screenshots of the email, but he sent it back, and he's like, "I don't know what to fucking tell you. It's the same thing over and over again. I try to help you, and you don't wanna be helped. You love eating like a pig." And he goes in
Yeah.
on all of this. This dude's supposed to be a clinical psychologist apparently too. And getting that email fucked me up for a while.
Mhm.
Like, just it straight up did. Um, and I think I thought he was right to at least some degree. Um, it's hard when you trust somebody in any coaching situation and they tell you like you're the problem. It's hard, at least it is for me, and was then, to not take some of that internally and wonder, like, "Is he right? Am I the problem? Am I broken?" Um, what I know now is that what I really needed was him or somebody at that point in time, 1, to listen and see how things were playing out and do what I've seen people like Dr. Eric Helms and, Brad Loomis and the whole 3D MJ, 3D Muscle Journey team do on the bodybuilding side, where I've heard them talk about when they work with someone or they're thinking about working with somebody or vice versa, and the person says, "I want to bodybuild and compete," they will ask, "Why?" And cool, you want to be a competitor in physique sports? Great. Tell me why.
Yeah.
What makes you want to do that? Do you know what that involves? Are you in a place where you can do that? And when the answer is no, they can't do it, or when they don't know why, or it's clearly leading to a destructive cycle, then they'll intervene, and if somebody needs help that's outside of what they can provide, they'll have that conversation. Because yeah, I mean, a horse to water, you can't make him drink, right? I just needed help at that point in time.
Yeah.
I just needed someone to take a fucking minute and be like, "Hey, man, here's what I'm seeing. Um, you know, I want to help. Here's what I think you need. Are you open to that?" So, in another world, that's how it would have gone down. That's not how it went down.
Yeah.
So, uh, that's the point where I broke it off with that coach and just found myself in a spiral for a few weeks. And at this point, I knew what powerlifting was, and I had known about powerlifting for a bit. And as I started thinking more about it and seeing videos of Dan Green and, just legends of the sport doing their thing, um, I started thinking like that seems pretty attractive. And especially because now I didn't have to worry about being shredded all the time. No one cared. Um, it was more objective. I
Yeah.
mean, powerlifting's still subjective, right? We can always bitch and moan about whatever the calls are at a meet. Was that depth? Was it not? Etc.
Oh, yeah.
But it was,
People don't
yes,
shut up about it.
they don't. Um, I've been that person, but it was more objective of did you lift to standard or not
Yeah.
versus hey, your lats are smaller than that guy's. And that for me at that point in time was amazing. It felt like a rebound girlfriend after the breakup. And so I still had these like, it's, I'm just going to say it's going to be probably inaccurate, but like obsessive compulsive type tendencies or just hyper focused,
Yeah.
where I now know I was channeling a lot of my anxiety and finding self worth in different things. Before it was, how lean could I be? Now it was, how pretty can I make my squat? How much can I squat? Etc. So it was a different thing, a different focus. Um, but it was still my anchor. And I kept powerlifting through the rest of PT school, graduated, and that was about the time that I decided I'm going to compete with the help, thankfully, of a friend of mine at the first gym I trained at out of school, who was a competitive powerlifter. He went up to compete at Worlds as a junior. Uh, one of those things where we just started talking about powerlifting, and he's like, "Do you compete?" No, I don't think I'm strong enough. Like, that's stupid.
That's
You should
yeah.
compete.
Yeah.
So I needed that. I was the guy who needed it. Now I get to be that person for others. So thanks, Conrad. And yeah, did the first meet, and that was in 2016, and lots happened since then.
Yeah, so I think one of the cool things about powerlifting is obviously it takes a lot of sacrifice and diet, training, recovery, and stuff to become good at powerlifting. But if you just want to compete in powerlifting, you can do it at any point. At any point in your training career, as long as you can just meet the standard and follow some rules. And that's what makes it the community so important to me. In that when you see these segregated federations or these different crews fighting with each other, or mostly these raw lifters just training on their own, like that's what hurts me the most, because it's a community based sport, and while bodybuilding is, which I have great respect for, but it's so
Mhm.
much more selfish, but rightfully so, because you have to focus on your own body. But at the end of the day, like the top levels, or even to get to do a show, it takes so much just to get to that first show, even if you're a natural competitor and you're just doing like men's physique or something like that, where it's like I guess the bar to entry is lower than obviously like a pro open show. But
Yep.
I think that's why powerlifting is awesome, because you can go to these local meets and some 40-year-old soccer mom is pulling a plate for the first time, and like that's
Yep.
cool, a cool moment. To where bodybuilding, it's almost like I don't know the word to describe it. It's so much more of like um not the selfishness, but the competitive atmosphere is so much different that like I don't
Yes.
feel that community sense, but that gym lifestyle sense of like these bodybuilders train together, that's cool too. It's the more
Yes.
competitive side that I could never see myself doing.
Agreed. One of my other good friends, his name's Nick. He is a competitive natural bodybuilder. Also happened to train at the gym that Conrad gave me the push to go compete at. And we compared notes because I was super surprised in the best way at my first meet, and continue to be, with what you just said. The community aspect, whether it's training, and certainly at a meet environment where you get somebody who's new. The vast majority of people there, especially if they're seasoned lifters, they're like, "Hell yeah, dude, welcome! Like, this is awesome. You need help? Let me show you how this goes." And like, people jump in if someone doesn't have a handler. Super supportive. There's an asshole in every bunch, but like most of the people are great.
Yeah.
Nick told me that for his experiences with competing, like there's a whole lot of standoffishness,
Yeah.
and
That's
just
the
like,
word I was looking for. Stand yeah, exactly.
yeah, and they're just, staring at each other and that sort of thing. And I can't speak to it, but I trust Nick, having done that a few times. And I don't know, different vibes, I guess. But also, to your point, yeah, when people do train for bodybuilding or other things, and they're collaborative, they push each other. I just think people helping other people do what they want to do is pretty damn cool.
Yeah, and another point of your story too, of like one of your inspirations being like Dan Green. I think that time in powerlifting was a huge transition that wasn't
Yes.
necessarily aware of at the time, but something that you can see now is just the idea of a lean powerlifter that's more than 200 pounds. It's like you have like now we still have our like 150s and our small guys and stuff like that, but now
Mhm.
you see guys up to like 308, even some super heavyweights with abs, and you didn't see that in the early 2000s. In the early 2000s, the motto was just like eat, get bigger, get stronger, get as fat as you fucking can, especially to stuff yourself in your gear and all that. And like the Lily Bridges and Dan Green, and
Mhm.
now you're seeing like Larry Wheels, like these shredded
Mhm.
powerlifters that are setting records. And now the heaviest total of all time was done by someone who weighed 260. Like it's
Yeah.
crazy to see that change kind of evolve
It-
into now.
oh yeah, absolutely, man. Like, I remember exactly what you said. Seeing Dan Green, he is jacked, incredible hair. I'm like, man, I want to do that. Pulling sumo, which was also like, for me at that time, I hadn't seen very many people pull sumo, especially at a high level. And then you get people, yeah. I commentated the Ghost Clash 3 last year, which was incredible, especially on the pro day, but even on the amateur day. What you were saying before about people just showing up, showing out, and giving it their all, especially when you have the ability to find out some of that backstory, which through my co-commentator, Brittany Diamond, she knew a lot of the people. We did some background research beforehand, just because personally, as a commentator, I've done 3 meets or so as or on the mic. I want to make sure that when the lifter comes back and watches that, they feel like they were done justice, for one, and that they were the star of the show. Uh, a few things pissed me off. more than listening to commentators who are just bantering about nothing when the person has just worked through all of prep and they're doing something pretty awesome. Like, give them the focus. My point being, getting to see Jamal Browner, um, John Hack, getting to see Brianni Terry, Hunter Henderson, a bunch of these men and women just blow up the platform was incredible.
Yeah.
So good to see.
And so with commentating, that's something that's what really makes it, honestly separates some local meet. Even if it's a local meet, a pro meet, doesn't matter. If you have a good commentator or MC, it changes the atmosphere of a meet,
Oh
especially
yeah.
to those, I guess, quote unquote, like rookie, like not elite lifters when they feel way more welcome. And that's something that I did last year with my meet that I hosted, was I had them like put a fun fact in like their best total or whether it was their
Yeah.
first meet. And shout out to Robert Bain. He'll be coming back for probably 3 or 4, whenever, however long I do this meet, because he was super of like semi what you know about them, and like I'm glad I
Mhm.
did that fun fact, and then it makes the lifters feel more welcome to be there. It's not just the,
Oh
oh,
yeah.
what are they lifting? It's like, who is this person? What's their story?
Exactly that. And, it's multiple folds. One, there's the lifter. They're going to come back and watch it. The live stream is the voice and the face of the meet. So you want to make sure that it's good, as good as you can make it. And doing the lifter justice, finding out about, yeah, the fun fact. The two of my friends, Sarah and Francesco Catalano, they're meet directors locally. They've done 2 meets for which I've commentated, and they've done what you've shared, where they've got the extra info and, like, for my part, I spend some time before the meet going through, making sure I've got that info collected, seeing open powerlifting, what we've got. We were talking before we started recording of it's always funny when the, open powerlifting records amalgamate 2 people,
Yeah.
and it's happened to me, like, once or twice where the lifter tells me after, "That wasn't me." Whoops, my bad. Um, but getting that info so that they feel like a superstar is great. It's something that I aim for. But then also their family, their friends, people who don't know what powerlifting is, but they know that Cam is competing and they're going to go watch Cam. If that can be intriguing and also accessible, granted, maybe not maybe a different level of commentary for the local meet where you're maybe catering to more people who don't know what's going on
Yeah.
versus a pro meet where people definitely know what's going on and they're watching like the best in the world do it. But still, it's engaging and it creates the hype. And I think ultimately builds the community. People want to do it more.
Yeah. So obviously with you commentating the Ghost Clash, you have been involved in the community, and you said you've been lifting for nearly 2 decades, and you did doing coaching for a decade. What were some of the things that you did to get involved in the community to meet new people? Obviously, you meet new friends going to meets and things like that, but like one of the major things, obviously, for me is this podcast. I've gotten to talk to many of my heroes and meet new people that I didn't know were in the sport. So, what was your journey in that aspect?
Yeah, it really started with those friends at that gym, with Conrad giving me the push. He and his now wife, they're both high level lifters. So as they put the idea in my head, hey, you should compete. And I started preparing for that. And I worked with a different coach for powerlifting and then did it. Conrad and Tegan were the ones who handled me at the first meet. And it was great. It was a local spot east of Toronto. The meet directors were really cool, where they said if you're a new lifter, put an X on your singlet with chalk, just so that if you miss a lift on a technicality, we'll still give it to you. Which I thought was pretty cool because they wanted to make sure that you left that meet wanting to do more and having had a good day.
Yeah.
So did that meet. It was great. I had that exact thought of when do I do this again? Um, so between my journey becoming more competitive and thinking about like doing more meets, and then also tagging along with Conrad, he had ties to a university called Brock University. He was part of their powerlifting team, and through his connection, there were other lifters who would compete locally or at provincials, and I tagged along with him to start learning what it was like to be at more meets and to coach. And we watched that attempt. How did it move? What did Conrad call for the second? Why did he call that? And starting to understand that piece. And then also get the social aspect of meeting those new lifters and people I'd never met before. And then as we were hitting a meet maybe it was every 3 months or so, between all the people at our gym and his connections, you start seeing familiar faces like, oh, there's Dan. Oh, there's Austin. And you just start making friends that way. And I distinctly remember 2019. Um, my coach at the time, his name was Austin. He and his business partner, they were coaching a number of lifters at CPU Nationals. Um, I guess it's Can PL now, but coaching all week. So I went up to help him out, manage warm ups and all that sort of stuff. And this must have been day 3 or 4 of the week. Uh, One of those late evenings, we had just done a session or two, and like this one wasn't done. And a bunch of us coaches were just sitting in the back room and, being able to crack jokes and talk shit. And Gino was there. So Gino came back and Gino was trash talking somebody else, and everyone was laughing. I didn't know who we were talking shit about, but it felt cool to be part of the crowd. Just that anecdote of being part of that community and so immersed, especially for a week of nationals, it felt really, really cool. Um, so that's continued, and both locally and even through the power of the interwebs. I mean, us talking as an example. Um, I don't game day coach anymore. I've had to step back from that just because of my vision loss. And if I game day coach people, which I have done all the way up to IPF Masters Worlds for one of my clients, I want to make sure the lifter has what they need. They're confident. They are, the person who's taken care of. It's just harder for me to do now with my vision. But through the internet, through the friends that I've met, near and far in the powerlifting community, that's where, someone follows me on Instagram and I see we've got like 10 different people in common. Have we crossed paths at a meet? Oh yeah, I was at that one last May. No way. And, that's how the social aspect really continues. And I, I'm lucky enough to know a lot of people who genuinely care about the community and go out of their way to bring people into it. They ref, they host meets, they volunteer, they just give back because it's given them so much, and I've just had the most respect for that.
Exactly, and that's why I love when people are not only aware of it, but actually do something about it. And so
Mhm.
you're a good example of that, of like when some people just go compete and they don't do anything to give back. And then there's the whole discussion of like some people think it's corny to have to give back to power. I was like, no, because if it's changed your life, and for a lot of us, it has changed our life. Like
Mhm.
you have to put in what you get out, and vice versa. And it's just a circle of karma. And it's sounds like some voodoo magic bullshit, but like if people know what I'm talking about, they know what I'm talking about.
Yes, I agree. I'm on that voodoo magic bullshit train of thought. I found it to be true.
Yeah. So after obviously about a decade of lifting, you decided to um, go down that coaching path. What
Yeah.
kind of markers or interest kind of led you to decide that's what you want to do? Because there's the whole discussion of um, like what it takes to be a coach, and I've had this discussion with hundreds of people, and I think there's a kind of coaching plague in powerlifting almost of sorts, of where there's these people that'll do one meet and be like, I'm going to be a coach now, or
DM me for coaching.
yeah, and they just recycle other information, or they try their own shit and it makes no goddamn sense whatsoever. And then there's the whole train of like, if you're you can only coach if you're an elite powerlifter, which I don't
Mhm.
agree with. But then there's so much to it, because you could have a 2,000 pound raw total and not know what the fuck you're doing, or you could
Yep.
have a maybe have done a couple of meets, but you've been to 100 meets, you have your degrees and you've
Mhm.
applied your degrees. Not so
Yes.
there's a lot of nuance to it. So kind of give us
Yeah.
your spiel on it.
Yeah. For me, I came into the coaching realm through rehab, which is kind of was a bit of a unicorn at the time that it happened anyway, which I graduated PT school in 2015. 2015, 2016, it might be a stretch for some people to imagine considering, it's 10 years ago at this point,
That's crazy.
and online coaching is what it is and it's ubiquitous and everyone does it and it's great. 2015, 2016, it happened, but not the same way, not with the same sort of profile and like understanding. That's just on like the training and performance side, let alone the rehab side. Because we're post COVID where everything had to shift online. It wasn't so much of a thing. So for me, talk about, just not knowing shit. I was reading as many Elite FTS articles as I could get my hands on. I was reading and emulating squat every day because that was hot and trendy at the time. And just, I thought I knew what I was doing, and I really didn't, especially in retrospect. But I was deadlifting at a commercial gym. I believe I had just come back from a trip. I wasn't deadlifting anything crazy. I was doing a bunch of singles because, again, squat every day was popular. It was like 80%, 85% for a bunch of singles. And on one of them, felt a tearing sensation in the back of my high left hamstring. Drop the bar, immediately start like checking out my hamstring, trying to see it in the mirror. Like, did I tear it? Am I bruising? Like, what's going on? Because it hurt pretty bad. And so I'm trying to use my newly minted physical therapist cap to figure out what did I do and self-diagnose because it felt like a hamstring tear. Um, and so I spent that year, and actually something I'm going to bring forward on my page and stuff. I re-listened to what I said to Dave on Table Talk. I said I'd self-rehabbed it for 2 years. I was wrong. It was 1 year. But the 2 year process, the number two comes from that 2 year focus of rehabbing.
Mhm.
I took a year to do it on my own. I'd make some progress, it'd feel better, we'd ramp up volume or intensity, and then it flares up again, have to pull back. I had to drop out of a meet because of that too. And I couldn't gain traction, couldn't make things stick. So at a certain point, I and my coach at the time had the same idea, which was connecting with a physical therapist named Dr. Quinn Hennick, who's now a good friend and colleague. He at the time was doing work with Juggernaut Training Systems.
Mhm.
And Quinn, being a competitive weightlifter and powerlifter, as well as a physical therapist, was doing these online consults. So I found out about him because I was on the YouTube rabbit hole journey and came across his stuff with Juggernaut. My coach Reed knew about him some other way. So reached out to Quinn, set up a consult, and him taking me through that consult and the subsequent rehab process, where he got the full rundown of not only like where does it hurt, what makes it feel worse, and like can you move your hip this way, that way, which any PT would do. He was asking, what does your program look like at the time? What does it look like now? Do you have a volume threshold for your pain? As in, if you do more than sets of 5 or 4, like does that piss it off more? Is there an intensity threshold, range of motion threshold? These questions which I'd never been asked before and had never seen anyone else ask. But as I hear them, they all make sense. I'm like, thank God you're asking me these things because I really need this help. So we get through it. Same consensus about it seems like a high hamstring strain. Tendons are, they're not fun to rehab. They take time. They're slow to remodel, all that stuff. So the solution wasn't just a bunch of like rehab type exercises, which I had been doing, or a bunch of self soft tissue release sitting on, a foam roller or lacrosse ball.
Yeah.
It was Quinn saying, okay, we've got these thresholds, which for me was definitely an intensity threshold. Couldn't handle above whatever the weight was. I can't remember now. It was worse with greater range of motion, deadlifting off the floor or full range squats, especially low bar. So the solution was we were going to break up the squat and deadlift exposures to one day I was deadlifting with lower load, greater range of motion with RDLs and slow tempo. Another day was higher intensity with block pulls or rack pulls, even actually. And then over time, we were going to increase the weight and decrease the height of the pins. Squats, we did SSB, I think, first. And then we worked our way gradually into greater range of motion, back to low bar over time. So rehab just looked like a reasonable training program.
Yeah.
And that was the missing piece for me up to that point. So going through that, and it wasn't like a night and day thing. Suddenly I could pull 500. It took time, a lot of time, but it was progress that would stick. Even with ups and downs, the trend was going the direction that I wanted it to go. So all of that to say, going through that experience and being a PT, knowing that I wanted to work in outpatient and sports medicine already, and then being on my own journey, which led me to powerlifting, and then seeing the gap, which still very much exists. It's getting better, but it's still very much a gap of you walk into any PT or chiro's office, shoot, even a doctor's office, and you say, I'm a competitive powerlifter. I need to squat 600 in 4 weeks. You're going to get, why?
Yeah.
You're going to get looked at like you got three heads, told that's dangerous. You're going to regret that immediately. And certainly when you're older and all these things, which for one aren't founded in the research. I just redid a post today where like the injury rate in powerlifting is between 1 point something and 3 point something per 1,000 hours of training. Soccer has s I'm getting it confused. Between soccer and baseball, one has 4 point something per 1,000 hours, one has 7 point something. So, I mean, if these are mainstream sports that we don't have any issues with, we should probably cool it when it comes to powerlifting and weightlifting. We're gonna be fine.
Yeah, and it's funny that you mentioned that because I know Dave Tate mentions that a lot too. Because it's funny that normal people are like, "Oh, that's a dangerous sport." It's like, no, people get hurt way less than literally any other sport. And yeah, maybe it's a numbers game, but he's addressed that before, and we don't need to dive into that. But it is just funny. But kind of talking about the physical therapist life
Mhm,
with powerlifting and that gap, something I've noticed recently, not necessarily recently, but it is trending in the right direction where, for example, like Covenant Conjugate, the team I'm part of,
mhm,
held coached by Mike Ski, but we have Ben Pauli now, and
mhm.
he's very good. Like if we shoot him a message, like I just popped my other pec, I had another pec tear, and I
Oh,
just
no.
popped it again. And I was like, what the hell's going on? So he's good at addressing that, and he's not a physical therapist. He doesn't like in the sense that he owns a clinic and does all that, and every powerlifter probably has some sort of story of, oh, they got injured, they went to PT and they're
Mhm.
doing wall slides and 2 pound dumbbells. And it's like, this isn't going to work for us. We need to load it as heavy as we can. And like you were saying, with intensity, range of motion, thresholds, and things like that. And having someone on that team, and I've noticed that some of these other coaches, one, they're either a PT of their own that actually understands how to do it, or they have a really close friend or PT that can actually apply it to the powerlifting sense.
Yes, exactly right. And I mean, obviously, I'm biased because I went through that process where I got something that actually was meant to help lifters. Um, so I want to pay that forward. And you asked how I got into the coaching realm. This is that path because Quinn co-founded an organization called Clinical Athlete, which is meant to help teach rehab providers to deal with or to handle, sorry, not the right word, to work with athletes better. Like, what do athletes actually need? How do you assess them? How do you treat them? What are all the needs, the physiological needs that they have? And then to connect athletes with providers who actually get it. So knowing that I was already doing clinical work, and then I started to have more of the exposure to people at my gym, people at powerlifting meets, and then more of the online side of things became more mainstreaming and more understood, especially post COVID. There was more opportunity to work with people. And even pre-COVID, it started with my friend Nick, the one who I talked about having done natural bodybuilding. Conrad and I coached together for a while, and Nick was our very first client. So it was another place where I started to cut my teeth using Conrad's guidance a lot, where we had a bunch of different clients at different stages of competition. Some were going for provincial titles and had their eyes set on getting to the national level. Some were just getting started out. So I got to see how Conrad wrote programs and I got to write my own and we got to compare notes and we would watch IPF Worlds and see what the attempts were. And Conrad gave me the mental exercise of watch Worlds in real time and see what the attempt was and then predict what they're going to put in for the second or the third and see what you get, see how close you are. So developing my coach's eye, like that was fun. And then especially being able to close the gap in my own way of somebody who is injured and wants to get back to lifting, whether it's to be competitive or not. They just want to be able to lift and do whatever. Um, just trying to pay forward what really made a difference for me. And now I've had the blessing of being able to do that for people all over the world. Um, I could tell you a bunch of stories, but one of them that comes to mind is my client Ria, who's in the UK. She's a British or was prepping for British Masters. 7 weeks out, warming up on 70 kilos, her back just absolutely spasms, extreme pain on the floor. Um, we didn't know if she was going to be able to compete in 7 weeks. We really had to play it by ear over that process. She still gets onto the platform and she squats 10 kilos under her lifetime PR. She deadlifts 10 kilos under her lifetime PR and benches 2.5 keys under. Um, one of many stories I could give, but that wouldn't have happened if I were scared to tell her to, okay, we're going to deadlift. This is going to be our progression. We're going to start you here, but I also know the demands that you're going to face on the platform. So we're going to get the info that we need and we're going to build you up. So, I mean, it's, I'm a little biased, but that's my soapbox moment.
Yeah, and one of the things I think is important for a coach is to have life experience and setbacks of their own. So now we can kind of dive into your major setbacks with HLH. Kind of maybe just briefly tell us about what it is. And so I do know that it can either be triggered by infections or something, or it can be genetic. So maybe tell us about kind of that, and then tell us about the journey to recovery. Obviously, this is going to be a longer segment. So
Yeah. So we it really starts in January of 2023 where it's cold and flu season. We come back from seeing my parents for New Year's. I start feeling a bit under the weather. I don't think that much of it because it's the time of year and my wife and my daughters are sick too. A week later though, they were better and I was still getting worse. So over the next 3 weeks, it goes from cold and flu symptoms to insomnia, which I'd never felt before. My lymph nodes started to swell, where it felt like running your fingers over a topographical map, where you could feel those mountain ranges. All of that over my neck and my shoulders. Um, really weird sinus pressure. And I went to my GP, got checked out. We thought it was a sinus infection. Antibiotics, nasal spray, wasn't touching it. We went to a smaller hospital because we live out in the middle of nowhere, got seen and was diagnosed as having mononucleosis, which was weird. It's the kissing disease. I got made fun of that in high school
yeah,
before that. I never had it. My wife hasn't had it. We've been together for a long time. Excuse me. So had no idea how I got mono, but that's what they said I had. They gave me some sleeping medications, sent me back home. 3 days after that first ER visit, it's 5 in the morning. I haven't slept again. I'm at the kitchen table. My wife looks at me and she goes, "You're yellow." And we both think, "Oh shit." Because we know that's something bad going on with my liver and we have no idea why.
yeah,
So we have to go to a bigger hospital further away, but we knew that they had more resources. I mean, you've heard my athletic journey in a nutshell. I've been active since I was maybe 12. And I'm used to trusting my body and being able to do things that are pretty athletic and knowing that it's going to be able to serve me and do what I needed to do. Parking the car, the ER entrance was about like 20 feet or so away. I really didn't know if I was going to be able to walk through the doors or if I was going to pass out. Get in, they take my blood pressure and my heart rate. Heart rate's clocking around 200.
oh wow,
Blood pressure spiked. I get registered and I tell the nurse, like, I'm going to pass out. And I very nearly do. I get admitted to the hospital. And through the next 6 days becomes this mad dash to figure out what the hell is going on. They put me on supplemental oxygen. I start getting delirious in the first couple of days, and my wife told me later that, um, the scariest moment of her life, not one of, the scariest moment was seeing me, her big, strong husband, I'm 6 foot, I was 194 pounds at the time, so weak and so helpless that he couldn't even get up out of bed and go to the bathroom on his own because I was so weak, uh, in so much pain and so delirious that I was helpless. And so day and night we had this stream of doctors, nurses coming in, taking histories. At this point, my mom and my dad drop everything, they come running so that they and my wife essentially trade off 12-hour shifts.
hmm
Um, I'm bleeding from my throat. I'm coughing up blood clots, uh, and my organs are failing. Um, this was because of HLH, which we found out later, right before they put me on life support. HLH it's not a true autoimmune disease. It was explained to me as one, but it's a hyperinflammatory syndrome. And it it causes your body's immune cells to attack healthy cells, especially red blood cells. And it can, as you said, be either caused due to genetics, which you'll see in children, like newborns, infants, or it can be secondary or adult onset, which is caused by either an infection, cancer, or a different autoimmune disease. Mine was because of the infection. It was this really weird, fluky cascade of influenza A, which led to mononucleosis, which was caused by the Epstein-Barr virus, which you can have and it lies dormant for a long time. And the mononucleosis led to the cytokine storm, which led to the HLH.
Hmm.
Depending on the stats that you're looking at, optimistically, the mortality rates are about 52%, can be as high as 75. So it was a coin flip about whether I make it back home to my family and to my wife and to my daughters. And at this point, I'm on life support where I've got a ventilator down my throat. My organs have failed. My liver shut down. My kidneys have shut down. I need dialysis. My spleen is enlarged, and everything's starting to spiral. Uh, I was on life support for 5 weeks in total. Those first 2 to 3 weeks were the worst, where treatment for HLH is chemotherapy, it's corticosteroids, and it's a whole bunch of other shit that you need to fight the infections that you get from being in the hospital, especially in the ICU. The irony of it all is that for many people who have HLH, and fortunately or unfortunately, I've known a few in the years since this happened to me. Uh, the chemo being a poison,
Yeah.
thank God we have it, but it's a poison.
Yep.
I couldn't receive the full dose of the chemo that I needed to have a shot at living. This became a day by day, but really hour by hour sort of decision where they were drawing blood, so many blood draws that my right arm was all bruised up and they had to switch to my left because my veins had collapsed. Um, to decide between my doctors, my hematologists, and the other specialists, and the pharmacist, like if they give me the full dose, can my body handle it? And often the answer was no. So it was bit by bit. They tried to give me nutrition. I'm unconscious, I'm heavily sedated, essentially in a medically induced coma at this point. There's a tube down my nose, through my nose down to my stomach, where they give me medicine, and they tried to give me nutrition. But because there was so much inflammation all throughout my body, um, I couldn't absorb it. So being unconscious on life support for those 5 weeks and not eating and not receiving much nutrition, all of this muscle that I started building because I wanted to look good for girls in undergrad,
Yeah.
and then kept building for bodybuilding, and then kept refining for powerlifting. Uh, all of that ended up buying me time because that's what my body catabolized for fuel.
Yeah.
And it didn't save my life. I in the past I'd said that, and it's not really not fully accurate because it was buying me time. We still got to the point though where they had given me the course of chemo for the most part. They give me the steroids, they give me other drugs, and I was still getting worse. And they gave me the last treatment that they had up their sleeve. And there was a conversation of between my hematologist, who was heading up my medical team, and my parents of like, his body's going to do what it's going to do now. And as the hematologist walked away, the charge nurse who was nearby and overheard came up to my parents and said, "It's important that you understand what she just said. There's nothing else we can do for him." Because I was still getting worse, man. They were preparing my family to say goodbye to me that week. They're like, "We're going to talk about what we can do to keep him comfortable, and you should start getting ready to say goodbye." Um, I can only tell you that there was a lot of prayer being offered at the time, because at that point where the last treatment was given, and not only did they not see the results they were hoping for, they kept seeing me get worse, and they were starting to prepare to wrap it up. I started to stabilize and come out of the nosedive with my vitals and start to slowly get better. I had no business starting to recover and pull out of that nosedive at that point, to the point where the doctors and nurses who saw this whole process go down started calling me Miracle Man, because that just shouldn't have happened, but it did. Now, it wasn't the case where I got better and everybody clapped, you know? I woke up in the ICU. It wasn't a singular moment, because my the weeks on life support is a black box that I had to get filled in afterwards.
Yeah.
But my memories start to come back in patchy. But as I'm waking up and starting to get my bearings of what's going on in the ICU, I'm waking up strapped to the table, or the bed, excuse me, because the medicine that they had used to sedate me and stuff, it affects people differently. For some people, it makes them paranoid. It did that for me, and I've ripped out tubes multiple times. So they had to physically restrain me for my own safety. I couldn't speak because the ventilator that was down my throat now was through my throat,
Mhm.
because they can only keep the vent down your throat for so long before complications happen. So they had to give me a tracheotomy. Um, I was hooked up to catheters, couldn't speak, couldn't move, and I went in at about 194 pounds, and I woke up at about 150. Skin and bones, man, um, because of all that muscle that my body had used to buy me some time. And the plus side of being a physical therapist in that situation is that I understood what was going on. That was also the downside, where I knew this was some serious shit, and there was there was no one who could tell me how long it was gonna take. No one could tell me, like, "It's gonna be fine." Um, People tried, but, they could only tell me so much. So, it's there's where it began the long journey to try to get back home, because that's all it was about for a long time. Um, and you want to talk about a head game. I mean, I've never been an incredible powerlifter by the numbers, but clearly been in it for a hot minute. And this all again was 2023. So I was used to training, lifting hundreds of pounds on the regular multiple times a week. And at this point, I am too weak, even after they took off the restraints. I am too weak to sit up in bed. Like, if you told me that unless I sat up in the next 5 seconds, you were gonna be the Joker from The Dark Knight and blow up the hospital, fucking push the detonator, because we're already dead.
Yeah.
It's just not happening. Um, that was there were those 2 fronts to kind of fight on. One was the physical, where I truly had to start from ground zero, where I had to chew and swallow ice chips to learn how to swallow. Because, like any other muscle, if you don't eat or speak or swallow for 5 weeks, all of your throat muscles atrophy. And then you can't eat or drink, because you'll likely have that food or drink go into your lungs. It'll cause pneumonia and you might die.
Yep.
So it was ice chips and swallowing. And I had to pass tests before they would let me have anything to drink. And when I tell you, Cam, that I would have very likely murdered somebody for a cup of ginger ale, I am not really joking. I am, but I'm not. Um, there was that part of rehab. The rest of the physical was, the physical therapy team would come in and see me in the ICU, and our first sessions were just literally sitting up at the side of the bed and not passing out, and then standing with like 2 or 3 guys helping me get up for 5 seconds and sitting back down. They would use this big mechanical lift to put me in a chair, because I couldn't walk there myself, and sitting like this, like we've been doing for the last however many minutes, that that gassed me after about 10 because just fighting against gravity was exhausting. Like that's where the physical rehab really began. It involved learning how to speak on my own, how to they made sure I could breathe and not need supplemental oxygen. It was learning how to walk with a grizzled old PT who, in every war movie, whether Vietnam or World War II, there's the grizzled vet that's just chain smoking, like, oh, we got fresh meat. That was my PT. She was great. She scared me a bit, but she was great. Um, so she and her assistants helped me learn to walk again with a big old platform walker and then a four-wheeled walker and then a cane. Um, it was just all stuff that we learn in PT school. It's just weird when you're the one who needs it.
Yeah.
Which then goes into the mental side of, you know, through this period of time, there were some days where I was just locked in and I was going to crush it. I was seeing all of my doctors that day. I was crushing PT. I was going for walks. I was, downing my ice chips. And other days where the depression laid on really thick. My body spiked to fever. I didn't have it in me to go and actually do the stuff I needed to do. It was swinging high and low really regularly. And I needed to not I needed to learn how to not focus on the numbers, which was really difficult, as you might imagine, you
Yeah.
might attest to when you've been in a sport for so long that focuses on that and you measure your metrics and you measure your progress and you set objective goals that you're shooting for. I couldn't. Like my goal was get home, but I couldn't say when. No one could tell me. So it had to be about the process of some days I'm going to have it, other days I'm not. And on the days that you are open or are able to do it, go for the walk. When you fucking can't, rest. And learning to rest was actually one of the biggest head trips, but necessary things that I needed to do. Um, that was the hospital saga, though.
Yeah.
Um,
So, kind of before I want to, we kind of spend the last few minutes talking about the mental side of it, but just a couple of questions about the actual hospital and
mhm.
the disease itself. So, is that something? Is HLH something that obviously it's not rhabdo, but in the sense that like you mentioned cytokines, is it something that your CPK like spikes to like ridiculous levels? Is that one of the?
I believe so. I'd have to go back and look at what the typical signs are as far as your panels are. One of the hallmark signs, though, is ferritin, um, and I had a lot of like sky high ferritin levels. Also, because I had active bleeds, so I needed a whole lot of blood transfusions. So I had iron overload for a long time. They have other levels that they'll look at, but the way they confirm HLH, at least in addition to the blood panels, is through bone marrow biopsies. So that's sort of the way that they use it. I'm sure there's some overlap, but I couldn't tell you for sure.
Yeah, and then you mentioned obviously the muscle mass thing, and it's something that why I'm so passionate about people just being in the fitness space because you can ask many doctors, many anyone in the medical field, and one of the things that people are very set on is muscle mass is one of the biggest fighters of disease, whether it's cancer, autoimmune diseases, anything that it like you said before, it gives you so much of that fuel to buy you time to let you try other options or to
Yes.
let the option that you work keep going and keep going. So that's why it's a very important. And they say one of the things to the biggest thing to fight old age is leg muscle mass. Like it always comes down to muscle
Yes.
mass, and everyone's always like, "Oh, if you're big and strong, you're going to have heart problems." You could, but it's the complete opposite. It'll save people's lives.
It absolutely will. And my personal attestation to that is as I was in the hospital and not well yet, I was still quite sick, but more stable. As you get more stable, they move you out of, they call it ICU A, which is the most intensive, to ICU B. And then I spent most of my recovery time in the oncology ward. Um, so this was in the middle at ICUB. It was one of those days where the nurses had just gotten me up into a chair, and that was my part of my rehab. And also to retrain my motor skill because I couldn't use my hands. I had tremors. I couldn't write. So I had to retrain that. I was brushing my teeth and doing other things. And the nurse came by and we were just chit chatting a bit. And she said, "One of the reasons why you're gonna do so well with your rehab is because you were so fit going in." Like, she told me like that. I agreed with her as a PT, but it meant something extra to have a nurse who sees people really not well on a daily basis say, "That is the differentiator." You know, you've got the coordination, you've got that muscle memory. It's going to help you. And as far as, yeah, staving off disease, more and more research on top of the mountains we already have that building lean tissue is the closest thing to the fountain of youth that we have right now.
Yeah.
And you want to talk about fracture risk, which is especially prevalent for older folks, especially for women with osteoporosis and osteopenia. And sidebar, there's some really exciting things happening for women's health, especially with HRT and what the FDA is doing and what that can mean as far as longevity and not having so much osteoporosis, osteopenia, and stuff like that for women. But as it currently stands, uh, once you fracture your hip, your femur, femoral neck, femoral head, or the pelvis, uh, there's a stat of around 50% plus will die within the next like year or so. So it's those are the stakes that we're talking about. And having more muscle mass doesn't absolutely make sure you're not going to fracture anything, but it does make sure, or it does mean that you're likely going to have more bone mineral density. You're going to have more strength and power and reactivity. So when your foot catches on something, you've got a bit more of a chance to not fall. And when we talk about falls prevention for older folks, like this is one of the key things. Um, so anyway, another soapbox, but yeah, muscle mass. Everyone, I don't think you could find me somebody who couldn't use more strength and or muscle mass.
Yeah. But so for the last about 10 minutes, we'll talk about the mindset. We'll kind of go briefly into like different stages of the recovery process. First thing, what was the mindset that first day you got home from the hospital?
It was relief to be home. Now, this would have been May 1st of 2024. It would have been the day that I had a skin graft on my left hand because that's where an IV malfunctioned and all that skin was blackened. So I needed surgery. That was the day that I left. Um, I came home, was wheeled out of the hospital in a wheelchair. I needed to take probably about 3 to 4 minutes to get up the stairs from my main floor to my bedroom with help from my wife and our friend who was over. And I threw up about 3 times between leaving the hospital and getting home from the chemo. So getting into bed because I was definitely bedbound for the next month. I was relieved to be there. I got to be home with my wife and with my daughters. And I think that was also part of where I got to and had to start processing more of the grief and the anger and the loss. I did some of that in the hospital. It's something it was different for me just being home, not being through the woods yet, and really confronting the fact that, fuck, man, you know, I spent about 3.5 months in the hospital. Before that, I felt strong. I was confident in my body. I was a successful business owner. I had, esteem and a reputation that I was proud of, and I'd worked my ass off for these things. And now I am a bedbound, dependent, frail person who can't even get up out of bed consistently or in a strong way. I can't provide for my family the way that I want to and need to. Thank God we had some incredible generosity from folks all around us. But I still couldn't be that provider. I couldn't be there for my clients. Again, thank God I had some incredible people, including my friend and coach, who stepped in and merged his business with mine to take care of my clients while I couldn't. But my point being that I had to wrestle with this grief and my anger at God. Honestly, why me?
Hmm.
Why did this happen?
Yeah.
Was it my fault? It clearly, from a medical standpoint, my doctors told me it was a fluke.
Yeah.
There was no genetic factors. We did the testing. So that's that was hard. And I definitely had days that month and the months that followed where I didn't get up. I was just in bed. numbing all of the raw emotions by just scrolling on my phone and playing games. So and still, he was choosing to sorry, phrase that differently. In the midst of that loss and that processing, I still had a choice that I had to make on a daily basis, which is, are you going to let this win? Or are you going to do what you can do about this? And some days I let it win. Some days I was just in bed, you know. But the other days I got up. I did my sit to stand squats at the side of the bed.
Yeah,
I did my yellow TheraBand hip exercises. I also knew myself well enough that I recognized I needed help and accountability to do it. It wasn't because I didn't know what to do. I know the things. I'm a PT. I got this. It's just always different when it's you.
100%.
So, you know, so my assistant coach, one of my assistant coaches at the time, his name's David Grubbs. He's a PT, phenomenal guy. Uh, he works with um, or with folks in hospitals, so he knew a good bit about what I'd gone through and what I needed to do. And I asked him, "Hey, look, man, I know you work for me. Are you willing to coach me though? Because I just need someone to ask me, did you do it, and to come for me if I don't." And God bless him, he was willing to do it. So yeah, it was more weeks of sit to stands and 2-pound lateral raises. And then eventually I had the strength to go down 2 flights of stairs to my gym in my basement
Uh,
where I did more goblet squats and I did more, banded hip exercises.
mhm, and I I think, sorry to cut you off, but I think
Go
one
for it.
of the, things that obviously it's normal human emotion to have the good days and the bad days, but being able to recognize that accountability factor is huge because all these top level athletes that one are either their coach themselves or have that ability, so they still have coaches because that, like you were saying before, it's a lot easier to point the finger at yourself, and it's a lot harder to take accountability for yourself in that situation. So,
Yes.
like I was saying, it's normal to have those good and bad days, and I think it's important to have those because without the bad ones, you can't have the good ones, and you don't learn from the good days. You learn from the bad days.
Agreed. Absolutely agreed. And yeah, I work a lot with other physical therapists, chiropractors, like clinicians and coaches. They are the clientele that I serve the most with my coaching business now. Excuse me. I still work with competitive powerlifters. One of mine just competed at WRPF Canada Nationals on the weekend and crushed it. But my point is, a lot of clinicians and coaches who know the things think I can't ask for help or I'm not going to because I'm a failure. I should I should be able to do it myself.
Yeah,
And I point to exactly what you said of in what other discipline do the people at the top not have other coaches? It's always different when it's you. Yes, you can know the things. You can be an incredibly smart and gifted, coach, clinician, even athlete, but you still don't see your own blind spots by definition.
yeah,
So having somebody that you trust who can call you on your bullshit and say, "Yo, Jared, chill out. You're doing some stupid stuff over there. We don't need that." Or kick you in the ass a little bit. Be like, "Hey, look, man, you're sandbagging. Let's actually pick it up." That makes a big difference over a long enough time frame.
yeah, 100%. And as far as that mental journey, I guess jumping ahead, whether how long it is, at
Mhm.
what point did you kind of say to yourself, like, I'm back, like we're good now, like we're and obviously like it took you a while to get back to hitting that PR and like that was a big moment for you. But at what point along that journey where like I feel quote unquote normal again, like we can start pushing myself to get stronger, not just get better.
Probably about 18 months in, give or take. The first not the first step, but a milestone getting there was in February or so of 2024. Because I got out of the hospital in May 1st of 2023. My rehab started to look more like heavily modified training. and then it just looked like training through the end of 23 into the beginning of 2024. So, Dave, who was coaching me, and John, my still current coach, uh, as we did our thing, I started to feel well enough to start thinking about meets. So that was pretty significant. Where I still had no idea what I was going to hit on the platform.
Yeah.
We were going to know closer to, and I didn't expect it to be, anything close. I didn't expect it to be on par with what I had done before. But being able to start thinking about meets was big. I did the first one back on May 25th, I believe, of 2024. And that was a perfect day, 9 for 9, with a lifetime PR on the deadlift of 501, which was surprising and awesome, especially having my wife and my daughters in the crowd, having seen me through the worst of it, now getting to see a highlight. And then the next meet was August, about 3 months later. Did the same thing, another perfect day, 507 for another lifetime PR on the deadlift. That was where I felt more normal, um, in most of the senses. Medically, I was clear. My physical wounds had healed. I had multiple wounds that just took forever and a half to heal up.
Yeah.
My medical appointments for showing blood work was clear. The fact that I had 2 lifetime PRs on the deadlift was incredible. I didn't even need my squat or I matched my bench on the second meet back. My squat wasn't all the way back yet, but I didn't need it to be.
Yeah.
That's the point where I felt like, okay, all right, we made it in a lot of the ways that count.
Yeah, that's great, and I think your journey is amazing and obviously inspiring to many people of, like, there you can get through way worse than you probably think you can, and,
Yes.
especially someone with that quote unquote "powerlifter's brain" that I like to talk about. But
Yes.
so now looking towards the future, I guess, what are some of the
Mhm.
things, obviously the year is coming to an end, so not this year, but maybe next year or even like long term, what are some of the big goals that you have now?
Yeah. I want to compete again. I was thinking about I actually signed up for a meet earlier this year, but that old hamstring injury that I mentioned before, it's been good for long stretches. It was fine through the first meet, started to peak up for the end of the second prep, and then it's been something that we've had to manage more since then. So just a longer off season, to keep building that back up. But I want to get to the national level myself as a lifter. Goes back to what we said before. And I'll be the first to say I am not the best lifter by the numbers, not by a far sight. Been around nationals and worlds multiple times, but it's something that I want to do myself. And there's a new branch of the journey where my vision loss, which we didn't get into and don't have to, but short version is I've got another genetic disease. It's progressive, it's incurable, and it leads to blindness. That vision loss has sped up, so it's another aspect of the physical and the mental journey. But one of the cool things about that is that there's the IBSA, the International Blind Sports Association, which has some crossover with the Paralympics. Uh, Blind powerlifting is a thing. So it's on my vision board, getting to blind powerlifting worlds. That's on the hit list. I don't know how long it'll take, but I'm gunning for it.
Yeah, so yeah, that's awesome, and, sorry to make a joke, but, like,
Go for
the
it.
vision board, it's just a funny dichotomy, but
Oh, dude, make a joke. I was I was telling John one time we were talking, and I'm melancholic by nature, so I sometimes brood, and I made a joke that I was brooding like Batman. John starts cracking up. It's like, "I'm gonna make a really insensitive joke. Gonna
Yeah.
go from Batman to Daredevil."
Oh god.
I'm like, "Son of a bitch." You're exactly right.
Yeah, but, I think we can wrap things up here, so I will ask you my final question. If you could give a new powerlifter, actually, no, I'm gonna rephrase this. If you could give a powerlifter coming back from a setback any word of advice, what would you tell them?
It would be that you're not done yet. What I mean by that is, done to me is when you stop showing up for the thing, even when the thing itself changes. Sometimes you go through things and it changes you permanently. If you're coming back from a setback or a crisis, I don't know exactly what it is. I don't know, and I can't guarantee that you're going to come back physically the way that you did before. But what I can tell you that I believe is that you can adapt and you can become better able to handle what life is daring you to handle. Sometimes that does actually look like coming back physically strong or stronger than before. But I do believe that you can become the kind of person, show the resilience, the adaptation that doesn't mean the pain doesn't hurt. And it doesn't mean that you don't feel all the emotions with it, but it means that you don't quit until you get to do it on your terms.
I fully agree.
So
I think one of the things that is great about a comeback is being able to reframe. And I think, like you said, you can maybe come back to where you were before, or maybe you can't. But if you reframe it, it's going to feel just as satisfying.
I agree, man.
Yeah. Well, I want to do a thank you again for taking the time to come on. It was my pleasure,
Oh, my pleasure too, Cam. Thanks for the time. I really appreciate it.
of course. Listen, I don't have a beard. I've got this glorious mustache. But even this stash deserves elite care. That's where Wicked Wolf Beard Co. comes into play. Their oils and balms keep the face fuzz fresh, soft, and ready for action. No crusty cowboy nonsense here. It smells great, feels great, and makes me look more like I lift heavy things. Beard, mustache, or something in between, Wicked Wolf's got your mug covered. Wicked Wolf Beard Co. Respect the stash. Head on over to Wicked Wolf Beard Co. and use code PLDEN for 25% off your order. Shout out to my guy Bear over at Summit Performance Therapy, the only person I trust to scrape me, needle me, and massage me and fix my squat at the same time. If your joints sound like microwave popcorn or you've been limping since Tuesday's deadlifts, Bear's your guy. He knows lifters, he is a lifter, and he's got magic hands, dry needles, and a deep understanding of how to not let your body fall apart. Book a session and tell him the PL Den sent you. Summit Performance Therapy. Reach your summit. Powered by Bear. Literally.